I'm Priya Thompson. I am test practice lead at Telefónica Tech. I have been in QA for the last 20 years. Um, worked in various sectors, including retail, banking, insurance, healthcare, advertisement. I started my career long back as a manual tester, have passion in testing, I've always been in quality assurance and in testing. And then slowly moved on into automation, and that's where I think I've brought in changes. I've worked in organizations like Bupa, Google, private banking like Hopkins, Singer and Friedlander, Barclays, um, and many other clients. My main focus is to drive change in terms of quality assurance and testing in organizations, and then slowly lead them towards automation testing, try to save time and cost, and also improve the process of quality assurance. I've involved in automation mostly front end testing. So I've started with a lot of apps testing, with sometimes with mobile apps as well, using Selenium, WebDriver IO, and Playwright recently. Involved in performance testing as well, so use tools like JMeter, K6, and then recently, few years back, I was involved in the backend testing, so using Python. And since Telefonica Tech, and also before that during Adatus, I have been involved in mostly ETL testing, using Azure platform, so using Databricks, Fabric, as well as Azure technologies like ADF and DQ notebooks as well. I'm a very passionate person about quality assurance, um, and I think quality assurance is the key to driving a change and improving the overall objective of the release going forward. So I'm just gonna go through to the next slide. So this is a brief agenda of what I want to cover. So I wanted to cover something about what are the misconceptions that are about testing, why it is important, and then really talk about how we have tried in Telefonica Tech to achieve some of these objectives, try to understand what our clients are trying to say to us, and try to drive that change through our framework and through our processes. So just a brief introduction. So, whenever I have been in any organization, when I go in any organization, time and time again, I hear some of these customers speaking to me, and I do get some of these issues that they are facing, because generally testing was manual. And I think some organizations still do it, a lot of their testing manual, which means that it is often a long process. It is time consuming. It is very expensive for the clients. And when there are budget cuts and stuff, testing then proves very tedious for the clients to justify the cost of it. Well, some of the clients have also seen that they want testing, or we'll do it at the end after the development is completed, or we will concentrate on the code, only on the code for the testing. We, forget about the process and stuff. What this generally means that it has bugs are delivered very late in the process, which means you have to go back to where it started, which means you're not saving any time, you're actually increasing the time for the release. The code then is not in a good place for it to be released into the environments. It's often very costly for the clients. So then you see the cuts, or do we need this kind of environments? Do we need to do that much testing? Should we cut the testing phase smaller? And I think a lot of it is driven by some misconceptions, because people have experience. A lot of it is because not they don't have a formal process for testing, or they don't have much reliance on automation testing, and over reliance on manual testers. And what we have tried whenever I've gone to any organization, especially in Telefonica Tech, we have tried to understand some of the nitty-gritties of what the client is facing and why they are facing it, and then trying to implement a strategy that will help them come out of, which is also cost effective and time effective. Not all clients want that, some clients want to work with their existing manual testers and upskill them. So what we have tried to is to understand, it's not about, oh, this is our framework and this is where you want, this is how you do it, but taking the client on the journey with us, upscaling the client as well, so using their current testing capabilities and trying to see how we can best help our client, either giving them a process that helps them fit of how do you manage your testing, how do you create your test scripts, how can you expedite the creation of the testing, or whether it is the actual execution of the test cases, or maybe it is the release management. So I think every client is a little bit different. Every problems of each client with respect to quality assurance and testing is a bit different. So what we have tried to do is we have a framework which we have created, but we cater that framework to specifically to the client needs. In terms of quality assurance, so I think there is another misconception is it's quality assurance of testing is only testing the code, but it's not. It's much more than that. It's about it actually, quality assurance starts when you're designing phase, when you're designing your architecture. That's where the quality assurance should come in, because the test engineer or test lead should be involved at the start when they are looking at the architecture, looking at the data, looking at the environments, looking at your infrastructure of how this is going to fit. How do I ensure that testing is delivered right from the start, from your infrastructure to your unit testing to your system testing phase, and then to your operational acceptance testing. So it is a process of continuous and consistent improvement. It's not just when the code is ready, that's when I need to focus on testing. It's about ensuring that process is followed, ensuring that we have sign-offs, ensuring that your client is on your journey when you're creating your scenarios, when you're creating your test data. Involvement of the client, involvement of the infrastructure team, involvement of your architects along with your testers is really, really important. So I think just testing the code at the end of the project is not what testing should be concentrating on. It should be concentrating right at the start when you are creating your requirements. What is your key objective as a business user? What are we trying to deliver here? What are the key measures? What are the key metrics that you're trying to deliver? What is your release process that needs to deliver by? The adherence to the release cadence as well, and then also obviously testing your product, your code base, and how we are progressing that code base through different environments. um, so in terms of, so now I want to really talk about our approach to testing. And what we have done is we have created different phases of testing. So we have infrastructure testing. So this is where we plan how we are going to. So for example, if you're doing Azure ETL process, how are we going to deploy our resources into an environment? How many environments do we have? Do we have dev, test, prod? Do we have dev, test, UAT, and prod? How are we going to do these deployments? Is there a CI/CD? In terms of the sign-offs, who is going to test this, how are we going to test this, and who is going to be signing off from a business point of view. In terms of unit testing, so this is where the developers are mostly involved, and they are involved in writing the code for it. And as us as the QAs, we are responsible for testing that the developers have done a good amount of unit testing. And this is where importance of a QA who understands how to read the code, how to read the unit test is very, very important. Is there enough unit testing provided? Is there enough pass rate criteria that the test developer has done? And this is where I feel the developers and the testers need to work really, really close together to understand this is a very important phase, and it's often unlooked because oh, we will test, there is system testers to do the system testing, so let's, unit testing is not important. But it is really, really important. It is important that we are peer reviewing the process as well. So as a QA, I'm very involved in when we are doing unit testing, and I've kept my testers involved in that process as well, in the whole development process, because I think a majority of your defects can be resolved in the unit testing phase. For example, adherence to the code criteria as well. How are we consistent? How we are creating our functions? How we are naming our functions? These are very important bits that come in later phase when we are handing over the code to our clients for maintenance purposes. Have we created enough documentation for specific functions that we are creating? And these questions needs to be asked by the quality engineers at this phase itself. Then is the system and system in. This is where we are involved heavily. This is where the tester takes the responsibility of testing in the test environment before passing on the code to a user acceptance testing. And it is very important in this phase that we have good involvement from our product owners, where to explain them how we are testing this, what are the key scenarios we are tested, what are the positives and what are the negatives we have tested. We have introduction to good amount of quality gates, and QA focuses on the organizational expected quality management as well. So it improves the end-to-end development of the product lifecycle rather than just concentrating on the code. So this is the phase where you're looking at the requirements. Um, this is what the requirement, suppose this is my code and is my end product meeting that? Then comes the user acceptance. So typically this is when we hand over the release to the client for the business users to test. But we are heavily involved in this phase as well. It's not about just handing it to the business users. Here you go, and you can do your testing. This is a phase where we work very closely with the business users. We understand what business user scenarios they are testing. Ideally, you don't want the same scenarios that you have tested in system test and the user acceptance test. This needs to be a very drastically different phase. System test concentrates on how the code should behave in terms of infrastructure, the data, and the code. Business users need to test from a business point of view. These are my measures and metrics. Am I getting the right output from what I'm expecting from a business point of view? And that's where the concentration of user acceptance testing is. I've often seen that user acceptance and system testing kind of sometimes blur because they are covering the same scenarios. And as a good QA, I think we need to step in into there and say, no, that's not user acceptance. We have already covered this in system and system integration testing. So it's very important for QAs to work with end users, with product owners in the system test phase. So we have a clear demarcation between user acceptance testing and system integration testing. So we are not repeating the same thing again. And then we come to the operational acceptance. So this is where we have the system in release, in production, and often it's normally, oh, we stop testing there. But I think it's very important that when you are in production, you have some sort of test running. You don't have to run the entire set of tests that you have run in system and system integration testing, but a subset of these tests can be easily run on production environment, like your key figures. Am I hitting the right number of numbers? For example, some of the tests we have implemented is, one of our clients had uh, 1 million customers, and then every time we run the customer data, is the threshold less than, should be always more than 1 million, and if it is less than 1 million, then raise an error, right? So we used to run those kind of counts on the production environment on different tables, and create that test used to run as soon as the ingestion is completed, so there is an error or an alert on the system to make sure that something is not right. And these operational acceptance tests can easily be automated, and they can be triggered as soon as your ingestion cycle is completed, or your reports are produced. They are very, very important, and it can be as simple as, has my ingestion completed, and are there any errors in my ingestion? Is my data, the quality of my data, correct? For example, we had scenarios where the age at death was not being recorded, and it was always being calculated as zero in the production environment. And these, you can easily create some of these tests, create a notebook that runs in the production environment quite easily. So you continuously monitor your quality of your data, the accuracy of your data in the production environment. So do not, the testing does not really stop after you have completed your user acceptance. Try and keep it going into the production environment as well, with a subset of the tests. So when we go into any client, we try and implement most of these testing phases. Some clients, we might not need an infrastructure testing. They might have had an infrastructure, but we will still do a subset of these tests on their infrastructure, make sure that policies are created correctly, naming conventions are correct, regions are correct. So you can cater for these specific test phases. Um, what we try and implement is that you have to have all these phases um, considered, especially at the start of the project. We try and see that we ensure that the client understands what's the importance of each phase, why these are important, who will be involved, who will be the responsible for sign-offs and stuff as well. So these are very important. And I think when we are considering the testing phases from when we come in as a Telefonica Tech to implement, we will try and implement each of these phases with clear demarcation of who is responsible for what and when. So in terms of planning, so typically when the project starts, we will have 2 weeks of our principals coming in and understand what is a good test strategy. We put this up front before the testing starts, so we know how are we going to run our test? Are we going to automate this? Does the client have any manual currently, an automation framework that they are currently using that we can adapt, or we can suggest them our framework? Do they have some manual testers that they are currently using, which we can use to upskill for our framework? Do we need a combination of us, some QAs from us, some QAs from the client side? Who are going to be doing our UAT? What kind of environments do we need? What test tools are the client using? So typically it's a 2 week of discovery phase where we will come in and our principals will understand what kind of tools we are using, what kind of environments we are using, how are we managing our defects, how are we communicating the releases to our clients, what kind of test reports are being presented to the cab, for example. And the client involvement in this is the key, because we don't want to come in and say, yeah, this is what you need to use. We want to understand what you already have, which maybe we can use and adapt in our framework. And if you don't have anything, fine, we can suggest you something as well. So typically for environments, I would suggest we have dev, test, UAT and prod, but that might not be the case all the time. We have to maybe only have dev and test and prod, or we might just have dev and prod. Obviously, we will suggest what's the best practice, but when we always have to work with the client. So we will try and understand how best we can make of the situation. So if we have only dev, test, and prod, how do we make use of that scenarios? How do we plan our UAT so that UAT can also function alongside system test? I'm a very big advocate of having quality gates. So each phase is very important, and we need to understand when one phase finishes to the other. For example, typical quality gates for entry and exit. So example, system testing. I need a good proof from my developers that they have unit tested the code properly. They have produced me the accurate scripts. I can see what data they are passing. I can see the outputs of the data. I can see a peer review has been done. And I will check all these things before I enter into system test phase. Similarly, when I am doing it, how can I exit the system test phase? I need to understand, as my test plan's been created, my test executions has been done, and what is the pass criteria? Is it 98% and above, 99% and above? How many defects are outstanding? So these are very important and must be mentioned upfront as the acceptance criteria to move from one phase to another in terms of testing. Typically, I would not exit system or system integration testing if I have any outstanding priority one or a priority two defect. And if I haven't completed my test execution or my test pass rate is less than 98%, that doesn't tell me that it's a good quality code. So we define these quality gates for each phase of our testing. So we as a team know, and that includes the client team as well as us, when each test phase finishes, who is going to be signing off these. We also concentrate on test management tools. So we work with the client with our licenses. Our preferred tool is obviously Azure DevOps, but we have worked with Jira. We have worked with some open source tools as well. This is just for maintaining our test scripts, maintaining our defects. So everybody in the project has a clear idea of where to find what. And there is no reliance on actually creating reports in Excel or anything like that. We have a way that we can auto generate this report, so that at any point in time, if we want to know the status of testing, we know where to find that. We also recommend defect management tools, so there is a clear, concise, which the defects are linked to your user stories, to your test plans, and everything is in one place. We're very heavily involved in release management. So typically the QA developer and the client product owner will work together to form a release, to understand when we're expecting a release to go out. From a QA point of view, it's very important that we have all our test evidences in line, in place. We can show it and demo it in terms of sprint retros, in terms of CAB, what we have tested, how we have tested, what data has been used. So it's very important that the QA is involved in the release management to understand the state of the build for that particular release and produce the correct evidences and test reports that are necessary. Like I said, I'm heavily involved in automation, and I prefer automation framework and automation testing. It's very easy because then I have my testers concentrating on actual debugging of the data and the code rather than concentrating on reporting and test scripts. So we have a way of how we have automated our entire testing, but also automated our test reports. So at any point in time, if I need a report, it can be generated by a click of a button, and then also automated test scripts. So um, I'm a very big advocate of, instead of writing the test scripts, because the code keeps changing, we need to ensure that we can easily update our script, easily create our script, so the tester can concentrate on actual test execution rather than the writing of the script. So we have templates and we have automated most of our testing as well. But these are the key aspects, I think, when we plan testing, why creating a good strategy is really, really important at the start of the project. And I typically, before test execution or sprint zero starts, these 2 weeks are really important to understand and negotiate and understand, help the client bring with us on this journey as well. I'm going to talk about the automated frameworks that we have currently implemented in TT at the moment. So as in TT, we are mostly involved in ETL testing, data migration, deployments, Power BI reports, and we have been successful in creating many frameworks where we have automated much of these. So the current frameworks that we have currently implemented are for ETL testing. This includes Azure, Databricks, and Fabric, data migration testing, and also infrastructure as a code deployment. So this is when we are deploying the infrastructure onto our the different resources, Azure resources that are deployed to a subscription. Scripts are auto-generated for each layer, so tester is only writing their transformation logic. So the way the framework works is we do not write our scripts physically. We have a way of generating our scripts, and I think this is where the most of the time is saved. Typically, I've seen in organizations that most of the time the tester is writing the scripts. They're creating their, whether it may be a test plan that they're creating, where they're physically creating their test cases, or even writing the automation code. And I think first, when I came into Telefonica Tech, that was my first objective, is to how do I save time for testing? And where is the key important component where most of testing time is consumed? And I realized that is a lot of is writing the test scripts, writing the code. And when the code changes, for example, you change the field, you change a table definition, then, oh, I have to go and update the script. So a lot of emphasis we have prepared on, can we automate the whole process of writing the scripts? Can we automate the process of generating our test data or generating our test scripts? And this is where the framework is really, really key, because the testers can really easily create the test scripts by just running a command. And the set of scripts is auto-generated for them, which saves them time. So if in sprint zero, my developer says, yes, I have started writing the contract, my code is ready, the tester is also ready with the test scripts, which means we can test in the same sprint on the same day as soon as the developer is ready. If we want to test the developer, we can test with a developer set of test data that we can prepare for the developer as well. So a lot of emphasis is try to shift left, try to bring testing as early as possible to remove the time that is required for creating the test script so we can start execution as soon as sprint 0 or sprint 1 in terms of testing. So a lot of our test scripts rely on, we don't rely on writing the scripts from scratch. It is already there for the developer, for the testers to start executing. The frameworks that we have built for ETL is mostly with in terms of Python, data migration as well, and then infrastructure as a code. We have used Pester as a framework where we check what resources have been deployed. We check their naming convention. We check that the correct policies are in place. Do we have the correct regions set up? What types of resources are being deployed? And if we find any extra resources that we have not expecting, then they also output that as well. So this is typically is when we set up environments, for example, dev, test, and prod, and we run our scripts to generate these resources. We typically have a test phase after the build itself, which automatically triggers the tests, and it will output what resources have been deployed into which environment, what are the subscriptions, what are the regions for this, what key vaults have been deployed, what policies are put in place, and if there are any problems. So this is a test phase before any of the project teams comes on board to see that the environments are set up correctly. We have a good connectivity from DevOps to Azure, or whether it is Fabric resources as well. So it's a very integrated environment which we can trigger off just after the resources have been deployed, and it literally takes minutes to run. What are the types? So in terms of ETL, the automated tests, we have written functions, so they are easy to maintain. And typically when you're doing an ETL testing, you want to check the schemas of the table. You want to check the table definitions are correct. What is your column names? Are they maintained correctly? Are they consistent? What data types do I have? What columns are being null or not nullable, set as not nullable? So we have schema checks where we have implemented. So if I typically have a medallion architectures of bronze to silver to gold, it will check at each layer these scripts run to check, have I got the correct table name? Have I got the correct column name? The data types for each column is correct. Have I got any fields that are extra? So it will compare your raw, your bronze to your silver. It will take the expected schema. So these are my fields that I'm expecting. Am I getting any extra fields that I getting from my source, which I haven't considered in my contracts, for example? Um, Also, it will output that if any fields are missing that I am expecting in my contract, but I'm not getting them from source. It will output it at each layer as well. We check for primary keys, if the primary keys are correct, and if there are any distinct checks on primary keys, we check the null values, the count. So these are all out of the box. The tester does not have to write any code for this. The code will be generated for them and they just can run this. We'll check duplicates with respect to primary keys. We'll reconcile the whole data. We also check referential integrity when you come to the gold layer as well. What it does is this means that we can run the tests as soon as the developer is ready, um, which helps with early detection of defects, and it also saves you a lot of time. Also, typically the testing is done at the curated layer. So a lot of organizations, when I go in and they test, oh, when the whole development is complete and it comes to the gold layer or the data warehouse layer is where typically the testing happens. And the testers are then using SQL to run some queries, and they check the data, they check the total count is correct, the aggregates are correct. Which typically what happens is that there's a lot of data loss that happens in between the layers, which is never detected until you go to the production layer, for example. So what we have tried to do is we can create these tests at each layer rather than running it directly at the gold layer. You have tests that run between bronze to silver and gold. So is there any data loss, any column mismatches, any nulls, or any primary keys that we have missed? It is detected at that layer itself. It doesn't reach the gold layer. This saves a lot of time, a lot of cost, and all your defects are detected really early on. So, the defects are minimized. Tests are repeated. We also have a specific tests that you can add. For example, at gold layer, you want to add more tests like aggregates. You can easily add those in the framework as well. Script maintenance. So this is where I have seen again a lot of cost and time is saved, because you don't if there is a column change, if there is a data type that has changed, typically the tester then has to go, you have to either do a casting or you have to change your scripts again. It's very easy for us to go and say, okay, fine, that script is no longer relevant. We need to regenerate the script. You can just click a button, regenerate all your scripts. We have arranged the scripts in our functions so that it's not a repetition of the code. We do what we preach as well. So we have unit tests that tests each of our test functions. So we have created unit tests for each of our functions to make sure that when we are adding or changing any function, we are on the right track. Ease of auto generation, like I said, if the contracts change, if your data changes, if your table definition changes, you have deleted some tables, you want to rename the tables, it's very easy to generate the scripts automatically. The tester, in terms of writing any test, the only thing when the tester needs to write is where they need to put any transformation logic. So typically if you're doing any transformations between silver to gold, that's where if you're joining anything, that's the only logic that the tester writes, which obviously it changes per project, so it is not something that we would like to auto generate. This is where we work very closely with our business users, which have the knowledge of how we want to create the semantic model, which tables are we joining, what kind of joins are we using, what kind of column changes we are doing. So testers will work very closely with the business analyst or business users and then write that transformation logic. But that is the only point where we would have the tester write anything. So this is a typical demo of how we would run our test. So the framework organizes all the sources and all your ingestion and your derived product into the contract. And what the test framework does is it will loop through each of your contract, each of your source system, and then it will go and generate all your test scripts for it. It will generate the test script for bronze layer, silver layer, gold layer. We have the abilities that if something hasn't changed, you can easily go and say, okay, I don't need. So if you see some of them will be skipping generation, and that's because those test scripts are already there. They're fine. We don't need to update them. They will skip anything that we have deleted or we need to regenerate. You can easily say there's a flag for it, replace if exists. You can set it to true and it will just regenerate all your notebooks again. The idea behind it is the test, like you said, you can see right now that it has gone and created all the tests. Each test for each of the source system or each of the data products that you are creating that sits within that particular folder as well. So it is easy for you to generate. For example, we have a source system Bamboo where we record our employee requests and who's out, and you can see the typical test it has generated. It has gone in, created all the fields that it is needed, run all the tests. It uses library called Microsoft library called Nutter, which helps us integrate these tests really well with our DevOps pipeline. So all of this is quite automated. We don't need for the tester. It is very easy then to use this tests, um, replicate your branch in Databricks or in Fabric, and just run the tests. So the tests are all there, your fields are there, nothing that the tester needs to populate or enter. It will automatically go and generate the contracts based on what your ingestion method is. For example, it can be full, incremental, what kind of primary keys you have displayed. If you have got composite key where you're using that, it will also detect that and create a test for your composite key as well. It will also try and optimize your performance when we are doing, for example, reconciling data. It will hash. It will do, you can do a full reconciliation, but if you are trying to minimize your performance, it will generate an all column hash and it will do the reconciliation on the hash values as well. The Nutter library that we are currently using, if you can see there, we have Nutter fixture there. It allows us to run tests parallelly, which means that we are optimizing the time it takes to run the test. So typically you can have about, thousands of tests, for example, running. You don't want each test, running sequentially. So what we have done is we have made the tests independent of each other so that you can run the tests in a minimum amount of time. um, it allows also produces a nice report when you run the tests as a part of your DevOps pipeline. It will generate an automated report for you so that the tester is not involved in actually understanding how many are passed, how many are failed. You can see that quickly generated for you in the reports as well. um, in terms of data quality tests, so these were the tests, that ETL tests that are out of the box, right? Like I mentioned, we can also create some quality tests. Many of our clients will have specific tests that they want to write. Obviously, we can't generate them or to generate them from the framework, but we have used something called data quality notebook, where we can easily go and write a function. And typically, um, these could be like, for example, we were working on a client where they wanted that if a tenancy of a particular property is on lease or something, then that tenancy can't run for more than a year or so, right? We can easily create these kind of quality tests by using a data quality notebook. So there is a facility in the framework to incorporate specific tests for the client, and these are typically run. You don't want to run these tests on the bronze and silver layer. You want to run this at the gold layer where you have the curated data. For example, here, some birth date should not be in the future. The age at death was not defined, or what if you have, for example, some of the NHS numbers that we were testing were not, they were repeated. So they wanted to understand what kind of the quality of the data they're getting from the source systems as well, apart from your count and your reconciliations and your nulls. These are very easy to create, and there is an customized script that are tailored for each client can be created using the DQ notebooks. These are typically run in the production environment, sometimes in the UAT environment where they have a good quality production data to give you this continuous indication of what quality of your data is that which is feeding your reports. Um, in terms of, so that was the ETL testing. In terms of data migration, so we have a lot of clients where we are migrating data, and that could be from one Azure subscription to another Azure subscription. So right now we are doing an Azure data migration from something which was in West Europe to Sweden. It could be from D365 to Azure. We have templates that we have created which will take your source and your target catalogs or source and target tables, and then you can just run those tests. They will run on tables. You might have files or volumes. You might have views that we want to move from one system to another. The templates work on all of these. They will do your count, your reconciliation, your schema check, and then it'll output your reports, output you the report of what the migration is. So we have done previously, we have done Azure to Azure. You can have like JDBC, and what we have tried to do is try to make it very easy. So a lot of time we have worked very closely with our client team, um, who might have automation engineers, who might not have automation engineers. And a lot of this is also upskilling them. So at the end of the day, it's the client who is going to run with this framework. So it's very important that they know how to use the framework. And so it starts with, because it is all auto generated, it is easy to onboard the client for them to use this framework as well. We are very clear on creating good amount of comments within the notebooks as well of what do you need to input. So it is very minimal things that they need to start with inputting first. For example, if you're creating a new connection, you just need to know this, the host, the instance, the port, and the database name, so that it is easy. If it's a manual tester as well from the client side, it is very easy for them to adapt the framework as well. um, it's also important that we will have KT sessions with our client on a regular basis. We will have documentation that is provided along with the framework. So we bring the client along with us on this journey of testing. So like I said, in typical, when you have these notebooks created, all we do is we get our branch sorted, and once you it's as easy as to create a cluster and then just run the notebooks, and you can see how quickly the test run, it's easily run in seconds. The first time we will run it manually just to see whether the tests are running correctly. It will highlight to you what are the passing tests, what are the failing tests, and it will also highlight you exactly why the test has failed. So it is very easy, even if you don't have a big team of testers and you just have one or two testers on your team, it is very easy for them to go and execute 90 test notebooks, for example, uh, in with the run all notebook or within a DevOps pipeline. It will give you exactly where the test has failed, and wherever, for example, count it tells you the actual number of where. The reason for this is the tester then is actually concentrating on the debugging and the analysis of the data rather than checking, oh, where do I get this data from? Should I write my test? What are the connections that I need to do? It doesn't need to do any of that. The test will automatically detect where your raw location is, where your bronze layer is, what tables you're using for your silver. The tester doesn't need to enter any of that. They don't need to know which tables. It will automatically detect, and it is automatically auto-populated for the tester. Most of our time is then about the test execution, analysis. So a lot of time I've seen the testers just identify the defects and then just leave it and they pass it on to a developer. We don't advocate that. Here we try and analyze the data ourselves so that we understand, okay, oh, the record count is missing because we have duplicates at bronze layer, so that we have a very good rapport with the developer. We work very closely with the developer so that the developer, there is easy detection, easy resolution of the defects as well. um, a lot of our times we will have reconciliation errors, and that needs to be analyzed, because is it something that we have missed in terms of our testing? So maybe we need to cast a string, cast to a string, or cast date time. It's very important that the tester knows and understands why the tests are failing and do the analysis before passing on the defect to the developer. So this allows the tester that amount of time, and this allows us to finish the testing of a particular source or a particular target that we are trying to within the sprint itself, um, because the tester is not actually writing the scripts. In terms of, so like I said, the first time when you generate the scripts, when you're running the scripts, you can run the scripts manually and see. You do not have to run the scripts manually and see. Most of the time we try and automate, we run the pipelines through DevOps pipelines. So the framework has an integrated um, system where we can run the pipelines through DevOps. Some other clients, we have run them through ADF as well. It depends what the client wants. So we have facility for both, how you want to run your tests. So typically, like if, for example, this client, we had 940 tests, you don't want them all to be run manually. You want them to be run on a scheduled. So the first time we try and run it manually, if there are too many tests, we'll just run with the run all notebook through an ADF, trigger it through ADF or through a DevOps pipeline. It will produce, will run all the tests. It will produce all the reports for you of what tests have passed, what tests have failed. You can also schedule this trigger. So a lot of times our clients want to have the whole ingestion process run, the master orchestrator run, and then trigger the tests at the end of the master orchestrator. That can be done. You can have it on a scheduled trigger, like I want to run all the tests on a Sunday evening so that on Monday morning when I come, I need to see the status of my release. That can be arranged as well. It's very easy to schedule a trigger or incorporate within ADF as well. So the tests, typically we will run first time manually, then it's run as a part of the build. A lot of time, other times we have had where the tests want to be triggered after a build is completed as well. So it depends on how and when you want to run the tests, but we generally prefer that they are run at least on a weekly basis. In terms of any ETL process or data migration, we all know that data is really the key. And it is not always possible to have that kind of data available in the lower environments, right? So a lot of it is PII data. So clients don't want that data to be in the test environment or in the dev environment. And we recognize that fact that not always we will have a good quality data to have our testing done. So what we have done is we have created some sample handlebars that we can provide a schema to it, and it will generate our data for us. So, and it will output the file. You can tell what file you want. You want a delta file, a parquet file, you want to create a CSV file or a JSON. As long as you have the schema, that's all we need, and it will create your test data. And then you can tell what volume you want. You want 200 rows, you want 10,000 rows, you want, whatever volume of test data need, you can create that test data as well. And this is typically when we have identified, again, coming back to, oh, testing is time consuming and we don't have enough data. So it is the ease to again move the testing left, so we don't have the reliance on the test data or the production data to be available in the environment. Having said that, I'm not saying that do not test with production data. Obviously this is a test data, we can't we can come as close to the prod data. It's not a true replication of the prod data, but it also helps you to start testing early and not rely on, okay, let's get the production data. Often that is a time consuming process and then it delays testing. So we can have a combination of test data and real data. So you can start with test data and then you can incorporate your production data. Data is anonymized as well in the lower environment, so there is no you know GDPR and all the guidelines are met as well. It's very easy to do that in the framework. Then in terms of, I've heavily talked about Databricks, but we have also extended our framework to Fabric, which covers all the Fabric tests as well. The principle remains the same, that we test at each layer, but obviously with Fabric you have the lakehouse dependency. So we have extended our framework where it will automatically detect your default lakehouse, take the lakehouse name, it auto-generate your notebooks, and then it is easy to run. And if you can see, it it will tell you exactly how the notebook, so you can have the results written into a report or into a data frame within Fabric as well, and it will tell you why the test is failing. For example, here the test is failing because the schema is not matching the expected schema. So we provide the expected schema and some of the fields are missing, columns are missing, or we have found an extra column, and it will also tells you what tests have passed and what tests have failed. It's very easy then to just copy the notebook link and give it in your defect, so that developer, when they fix the defects, they can rerun that test notebook again, rather than having to tell the tester to, if developers can use the test notebooks for their own testing as well when they fix defects. Um, in terms of automation, so I know we have heavily concentrated on automation in this, but we do write our test plans. We do write our test cases as well. We have templated our test cases, so we can import them into a DevOps or into a Jira test plan. We maintain that traceability. So a big advocate of having the traceability from requirements to your test plans to your defects. We have good acceptance criteria that we mention in our user stories. So we have templates for creating tasks, testing tasks for each user story. So when you're defining in your sprint phase, we will have typically the quality analyst working with the developer and with the scrum master to create the QA task for each user story. We have templates for that. We have templates for what our acceptance criteria should be for each task. We mention what is our definition of done when we can close the task, and all the it's one stop basically. So you look at your user story and you can see the link to your test plans, to your defects. So if as a QA lead I want to come in and see what is the status, I can see it in my one task in on my board. In terms of test reports as well, so this is the test report that you can generate in terms of overall progress. This can be produced per sprint basis. It can be produced overall backlog basis as well. It's how you set it up within DevOps. We have a way of how we set up our backlog, um, which can be adapted to a client as well. We have done this in Jira as well, but this helps us to understand each sprint what we are testing, what is the status of that sprint, how many test points that we, how many test plans are we executing in this sprint, and what is our current pass and end rate. And this is typically discussed in our sprint meetings or in our stand-ups. If it easily tells you if we are lagging behind or we are on track or not. So I just wanted to summarize in terms of testing. When you are planning your testing as well, there are some really key important aspects that you need to plan. Apart from your environments and stuff, is also understanding the test resources. Who is going to use this framework? What is your ratio to your automation to your manual testers? Plan the time it will need to upskill um, your current test team, or if you don't have one, maybe we can have developers running working as testers as well. So you need to really plan your test resources going forward. Ideally, I'm always want a release at the end of every sprint. At the end of every sprint, there should be a chunk of a good function that we are releasing out to UAT to test. So we don't have releases that are clogged up and we are releasing after 2 months or after every 3 sprints. No, we should be releasing something at the end of every sprint. So the testing and development for that particular module or user story need to be finished within the sprint. So we don't have releases clogged up. We're going to cab very regularly as well. Big advocate of automating upfront. If you do not automate, you're always in that cycle where you're never going to be saving any time or any cost on the project because you are relying on manual testing. So automate upfront. Not the framework offers you solution. It will not offer like everything for you. So you need to think. For example, we have done recently, we were doing extraction redaction for one of our clients, and we need to think about how we are going to automate that. Okay, we can do some spot checks, but can we use something? Can we use something to automate? Can we use a Spacey library? Can we use Presidio, for example, to automate some of our extraction and redaction? So it is very good as a QA lead to go upfront, see what we can use, what tools can I use to automate, how can I reduce my time and cost of testing. And the most important thing is to plan your data. How can have I got access to the production data? Do I need to anonymize my data into the lower environments? What kind of test data do I need to prepare as well if we don't have access to that kind of production data? All these aspects really help you to reduce the delays that are typically cost and time saving. So when you're planning any testing in any of your projects, just do plan. And the most important thing is also handing over. So we need a phase where we are handing over this testing to our client teams so that they can be self-sufficient going forward and then don't rely on us. So there's a time that needs to be upskill the resources, good training, good KT sessions that needs to be done, and good amount of a phase where we are working alongside the client as well, where we just don't hand over and then we go away. We work alongside our client where they are using the framework and we are helping and guiding them as well. So these are very important when you plan your testing. I think that was it from me in terms of next steps. So I think we are also planning our currently building our so we currently use doing some testing with biz apps, and we are building our automation test framework for biz apps. Obviously this is different for different clients, so we are trying to build a function where which can automatically go and read your typical biz apps functions that are used in every project. So we're trying to build a framework for that. We have also got a framework that we are using for Power BI testing, and then we are also extending our Fabric framework to use the CI/CD. So these are current frameworks that we are hoping that we will be finishing and be rolling it out this year as well. I think that's it from my side here. We have some new sessions coming up as well. So our regular forums sorry, user groups, so please do join there. And we also have upcoming sessions coming up in terms of DevOps and cloud automation on the 15th of July. that I think was it from my side. I hope everybody has enjoyed the session, and would be love to hear some feedback. And also, if you have any questions, do please reach out to us.